Welcome back to another episode of Morning Coffee. I'm your host, Rick Alexander. You guys can interact with me or follow me at @RickAlexander_ or at the Morning Coffee Podcast on Instagram. Now, if you're getting a lot from this show, if it's changing your life or even changing the way that you look at your life, it would mean the world to me if you would head to iTunes and give us a 5-star review so that we can continue to climb the charts and get this information to more and more people. Over the last year and a half, I've focused my work on the story that we tell ourselves about our lives. Your entire life is a bit of a story that you're telling yourself. And if you could tell yourself a different story, you could probably change your life quite a bit. And so I did that work for the release of my newest book, which is coming out in early 2020. But getting excited for that release, I actually wanted to go through a lot of the information that I had learned, a lot of my notes, and synthesize it into maxims, which is what we're getting into today. I've got 21 maxims to maximize your life, and what these are is just things that seem to be true about the human experience. And if you could understand how they are true, you could understand how they could change your life. And so if you go to rickalexander.com, what you're going to find is if you click on articles, the maxim of the day is going to be posted, whatever the last maxim was, and it's also going to have journal entries and thought experiments in there so that you can figure out how to apply these things to your own lives. And so a bit of an interactive experience. So throughout the next year, through my speaking, through my book release, and through these maxims, I'm excited to see how this information can really change the world and change your world if you give it an opportunity to. Back in Greek mythology, Pygmalion was a sculptor who carved a woman out of ivory. And after seeing all of the people in his hometown, all of the women, and he felt like they were prostituting themselves and not being someone that he liked, he declared that he was not interested in women. But then he found his statue was so beautiful and realistic that he began to fall in love with it. In time, Venus's festival day came, and in it, Pygmalion made offerings at the altar of Aphrodite. There, he was too scared to admit his desire, but he quietly wished for a bride who would be the living likeness of my ivory girl. When he returned home, he kissed his ivory statue and found that its lips felt warm. He kissed it again and found that ivory had lost its hardness. Venus had granted Pygmalion's wish. Pygmalion then married the ivory sculpture, which had changed to a woman under Venus's blessings. You know, when you expect something to happen and then it does, you have to ask yourself, is that self-fulfilling prophecy, or did you correctly predict the future? You know, this is something that many people wrestle with, and it's easy to get caught in your own mind. It's like when you have this expectation of something, let's say negatively, and then it happens. It's like, did you create it because you were focused on it, or was that going to happen anyway? And then you had this sort of intuitive sense about it. But luckily, it's not something that requires speculation, as researchers are continuing to find that a performer's expectations of performance is one of the largest determining factors in that performance. Let me say that again. A performer's, like you, your expectations of the performance is one of the largest determining factors in that performance. And so the question to ask yourself is, what do you expect is going to happen? What do you believe is going to happen? You will live out what you believe to be true. That's what research is finding. I think as we look to our lives to increase performance in some way, in some area, in something, to increase quality, if you don't want to use the word performance, let's say, then it gets really easy to get caught up in what you're doing and bypass necessary things, right? Like, it's kind of like when we will try all of the right supplements when we don't want to just lock in our diet or our sleep. Or then we'll offer like hire coaches and we read books and we listen to podcasts, but we still haven't tried believing in ourselves. And that's what I want to talk about today. It's like all of this necessary growth work that you're doing, hiring coaches, like getting programs, adding habits, adding outside structure, everything that you can do in your lifestyle to evolve yourself, let's say, will be useless if you don't actually believe in your ability. And the thing that I would say is, your belief in your ability is actually the thing that matters the most. And so oftentimes things become true just because we decide that they are. They decide to believe them. We decide to live them out. And so the Pygmalion effect or the Rosenthal effect, is the phenomenon whereby other expectations of a target person affect the target person's performance. So the effect is named after the Greek myth of Pygmalion, which is what we talked about, the sculptor who fell in love with the statue he had carved. These two researchers, Rosenthal and Jacobson, started a study back in the day, and it's one that you've most likely heard of before. But basically, they went to these teachers and they said, hey, we've given all of these random students tests, and based on the tests, these are the ones that are most likely to succeed. And as they tracked the study, it turned out that all of the students that they had initially chosen based on the first test to succeed were the ones that got the best grades in the class. Now, what the teachers did not know is that there was no actual test, that the students who were selected were actually selected at random. And so it was the teacher's belief in the student, which subsequently was transferred to the student's belief in themselves. They were essentially fostered as if they were gifted students, and then that became true. Now, in this case, because it was random, you actually can say that it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, that it wasn't this intuitive effect that the teachers or the people had. And we're always like dealing with all of these informational inputs. And so it's very hard to have real intuition about yourself and your performance. And so oftentimes we take the wrong cues and then we just act them out and they become true. A corollary of the Pygmalion effect is the Gollum effect. That's where low expectations lead to a decrease in performance. And you can see that all the time. I think we're often doing that. We get what we think is an intuitive sense about something. We create a narrative about that thing, like maybe this person isn't ultimately going to end up with me. But then what happens is we live that narrative out. And it's very hard to tell whether it was a self-fulfilling prophecy or whether you had an intuitive sense about what was actually going to happen. But again, research keeps showing us that it's actually self-fulfilling, and we don't like to think about that because the word prophecy in itself lends itself to a bit of like mystery and a little bit of woo-woo, and it's like hard to get your mind around. But it's not hard to get your mind around the fact that what you expect to happen is what's actually going to happen, or what you believe to be true is what ends up becoming true about yourself. I would say that you have to believe it fully, and that's where we get really caught up in this. Is like, okay, we tell ourselves we have the mantras and we're like, I can do anything. It's like, but you have to believe that, not me. And it's not the mantra's job, right? It's you have to believe that. You believing it is the thing that makes it true. And the other thing I would say is that the best performers in the world don't wait until they're mid-performance to try turning their narrative around. They go into it with the expectation of how they'll conduct themselves and what they'll tell themselves while they're in it so that they can execute. I remember talking to Kayla Banfield, who is dating James Newberry, who's a CrossFit Games athlete, and we were talking on the radio show, and we were talking about how he gets ready for all of the CrossFit Open workouts. And what he does is, I don't know if he does this still, but he was doing it back then. He would get a float tank, and he would get in the float tank, and he would visualize himself moving through every single moment of the Open. He would visualize like what it felt like, what each rep was, like what his score was going to be. He created this belief about how well he was going to do in the Open, and then he did it in the float tank, I'm assuming, because it's so isolating and it gives you an opportunity to create a real visualization that's going to affect your physiology. Because that's the thing to understand, is when you visualize and believe something to be true, your physiology comes into alignment with that thing. And so if you don't deeply believe it, then what you act out won't be right. Like, it won't be that. And so a lot of times what you see is that people they say that they believe something or they profess to believe something, but then you see that their actions are different and you ask yourself why that is. And it's like, well, because they don't actually know what they believe. They're just saying things. What they believe is what they're acting out. And so get to the core of your own belief system about your success in that thing, and then do everything you can to change that narrative. Right? Do everything you can to learn how to believe in yourself, because it is your belief in yourself that's going to make you succeed in the first place. The fact that a self-fulfilling prophecy is a thing isn't something to be shy from, in my opinion. As a performer, as somebody that wants to create their life, as somebody that wants to like really step into the arena, I would say it's the most liberating thing that possible, because you realize as you get these ideas about yourself, they're not actually intuitive sense, right? We're so jumbled up on our information and how we perceive things and how in touch we are with our own intuition in the 21st century because of all of the technology. I think one of the ways that the personal development industry has done us a bit of a disservice with things like The Secret, the show on Netflix, and the book, is that You assume that manifestation is that you want something really bad, and if you want it bad enough that you'll get it. But what's actually happening is that you have to believe that you're capable of getting that thing. And then once you begin to believe that you're actually capable of getting that thing, again, not that you say it, but that you actually believe it, then your physiology, your body, everything starts to come into alignment with your new reality and what you are capable of. Again, studies continuously show this, so it's not this woo-woo thing that's not rooted in some kind of science. It's what we understand to be true about the human condition. You can believe something about yourself, and in believing it, it will become so, especially if you believe it hard enough. And so the question to ask yourself is, what do you actually believe about yourself in relation to the endeavors that you're taking on? And I would say to not skirt around this one, because again, it can be easy to just dismiss it as, I believe in myself, I do. But the truth is, you want to be very clear on that, because again, whatever you deeply believe is what you're going to act out, not what you say you believe. And so if you find that you have trouble believing in yourself, that's your work. Okay, then your work isn't something else. It is your belief. If there isn't a thing that is going to be able to substitute your belief in yourself. One of the things you see a lot is self-sabotaging behavior. People get out and they self-sabotage themselves, and you say, why the fuck would anybody ruin what they actually want for themselves? And it's because they have a deep belief that's contradictory to what they're saying they want. And so as they start to go after it in real life, they run up against that contradictory belief, and then they end up losing that thing. And that happens, often. So understand that your deepest beliefs about yourself are the best opportunity that you have for success in this life. I love you. Have an amazing day. We'll talk tomorrow.